We're going to get started. You are in DEV306, which is Achieving Centralized Governance Through Policy Management. It's a topic that we're approaching from a unique perspective. So my name's Joe Kinsella. I'm actually the CTO and founder of a company called Cloud Health Technologies. We're a Boston-based company, and we're actually both a customer of Amazon as well as a vendor. So you'll actually, if you've seen on the exhibit hall, the giant 7-foot transformers, that's actually my company. Our tagline's Transforming the Cloud. And today we also have Ian, he'll introduce himself shortly, but he comes from a customer perspective. So we're going to try to tackle a pretty hot topic, I think, that's been going on in the cloud, which is how do you maintain the agility that brought you to the cloud, but to do that with the proper due care of governance to make sure that you're securing your company and you're taking measured business risks. So with that said, the plan is questions at the end, but if someone can't wait, feel free to raise your hand. I'm happy to take something midstream. So we'll kick us off with intros. So Ian, you want to?
Yeah, hi everybody. So my name's Ian Caldwell. I'm the head of infrastructure for News Corp in EMEA. So my responsibility is for the News UK newspaper printing business, the HarperCollins book publishing, and the Dow Jones finance business. We have offices all around Europe. Our HQ is in London, and I'm responsible for physical data centers and enterprise cloud hosting.
Okay. And what I'm particularly excited about is, in addition to being a customer of ours, News Corp is also, it's a unique business. It's a 40-year-old business that's using the cloud to transform itself, and so I think it's a unique use case for governance. So in terms of what we're going to do this session, we're going to bounce back and forth between Ian's experience at News Corp as well as my experience across working with some of the largest consumers of cloud infrastructure in the world. In addition to that, we're going to give you some best practice and tips and some lessons learned and even some of the mistakes that we've made along the way. And as I mentioned, if you can't wait, feel free to ask questions in midstream. Otherwise, we'll save them for the end. So let's get started.
Okay, so a little bit about News Corp and the cloud. So before we embarked on our cloud journey, we had a very sizable footprint across the globe. We had multiple data centers. We had thousands and thousands of physical servers. And our CTO at the time decided we needed to embark on our journey into the cloud. And he set a global target of 75% of our infrastructure was to be hosted in the public cloud within a 3-year period. We started off with our digital estate and mobile apps and stuff and test and dev. But before we did that, we also ran a global application assessment to see exactly what we could host in the cloud. And to be honest with you, there wasn't a lot that didn't tick the box that we couldn't put in the cloud. But we spent a lot of time on that. And I think doing your homework and your diligence beforehand, before you embark on that journey, was crucial to our success. As I mentioned, we looked at the digital estate first, but as we got on this journey, we started looking at the enterprise world and more for end user kind of computing and the likes, traditional newspaper and finance applications to see what we could host in the cloud as well. And I can say we're now down that journey as well.
Okay. Excellent. And it'd be great to give an overview of what are you using on Amazon today, Ian?
Pretty much most of their services, to be fair. I've got a list up there, as you can see. We use quite a lot. We've got over 15,000 EC2 instances. We've got 5 petabytes plus in S3 storage. We have 1.4 thousand plus Amazon RDS instances. And we use most of the services you can see up there in the UK, but I know my colleagues in Asia Pac and North America use a lot more as well. Some of the key tools we use as well, Puppet, Chef, New Relic, and we use Cloud Health to help us know what we've got in there.
Across that span of infrastructure, when we dive into governance, was there any particular service or topic of managing a service that was more challenging than another, Ian?
Yeah, we seem to struggle with our EC2 instances, the sprawl, the size of them. We need to give a lot more focus on our EC instances than anything else.
Okay, great.
As you can see there's to the left, we've got some of our titles, The Sun, The Times, and the Sunday Times. They're the main News UK newspapers. And on the right, there's the platforms that we use and the tablets. And the consumers can get our news on most platforms these days.
Okay, excellent. So I thought we'd kick this off with what is governance. So governance is just one of those terms that tends to be somewhat nebulous. And you ask someone in an enterprise, do you care about governance, cloud governance? And usually there's mixed answers to that. But when you put it in context, when you say, do you care about controlling your costs? Do you care about making sure you're continuously monitoring for the security of your configuration of your usage of configuration in the cloud? Do you care about your utilization and performance and capacity? It suddenly becomes very personal, and people begin to understand cloud governance. So my definition for governance is very simple, which is it's really just a process to ensure the secure, effective, efficient usage of IT resources. I talk about why governance has changed in the cloud. It is not what governance was 10 years ago. And in addition to that, governance in many cases, people look at it as, I went to the cloud to get away from centrally controlled bureaucratic processes. Is this yet another way to try to slow down my agility in the cloud? And I think that's a topic that people are wrestling with today, which is trying to figure out, how do I protect my multi-billion-dollar brand of my enterprise, but how do I do that in a way where I'm not giving up the agility that brought me to the cloud? Okay. So we'll dive into this shortly, which is, I'd love to hear your perspective on this. But so I view this as a balancing act, which is on one hand, we went to the cloud for innovation, we went to the cloud for agility. I've built, myself, multiple large-scale Amazon distributed systems that were in the thousands of cores of compute and petabytes of storage. And each time, there's just this constant challenge of, I need to put controls in place to make sure that my organization is effectively and efficiently utilizing infrastructure. But at the same time, I want to do it in a way where I don't take away that agility and that innovation. So, when I look at this as a continuum, which is there's no one right answer across an organization. I would just say, as you start to think about governance, if you don't already have a governance strategy in place, think of it as you're trying to balance two competing needs, and you have to figure out what's right for your organization, what's right for your organization now, what might be right in the future. And I'd love to hear, Ian, what was your perspective in terms of how you struck this balance at News Corp?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's a delicate balancing act, and it needs constant collaboration with all the teams that you're working with. I work in enterprise. There's a lot more controls in enterprise. The digital team require agility. We have to work closely with them and make sure that we're both working for the same goals. But in the beginning, it was difficult. It really was.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, so just I want to touch on why is this different, and so I had experience of working in a large technology company, an enterprise, and the pace of change in the infrastructure that I managed for my application was, it was for its time, it was relatively fast, but it was down to dozens of changes at most a month that would occur in an environment that could deviate from a governance or even external compliance rules that had put in place for our business. But the pace of change in the cloud is fundamentally different. So I'm sure you're all seeing this, which is there's effectively 3 and in some cases 4 orders of magnitude difference in terms of the pace of change in a cloud environment from a traditional on-premise environment. And this isn't actually some defect of cloud providers like Amazon. This is actually, we want to consume infrastructure this way. The fact that we have consumption-based on-demand infrastructure has changed the way that we construct applications. So just like one workload in my company is, it's an analytics workload, it's very expensive to run, it has non-correlated peaks that cause it to spike at different times that you can't predict. And so we've wired that to auto scale and purchase nodes in Spot Marketplace. And that's something that 5 years ago or 10 years ago you wouldn't have thought that you could do that. But today, that pace of change that I've implemented is critical to the success of our business. So I think that's one of the big drivers. Another challenge is just disparate management tools. When you're driving a governance strategy, often you end up needing data from multiple different products. The data is not all sitting there in Amazon, or it's not sitting there in New Relic or Datadog or Chef or Ansible. The truth is that your data that supports your governance strategy and the rules by which you actually want to assess whether or not you're complying to it, it will actually, it'll be span multiple products, and it's essential that you're able to synthesize that data in one place to be able to institute those rules, understand your compliance, and then understand how you're actually going to go drive change based on that. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that infrastructure and how we manage it has fundamentally changed, and with it, governance also needs to go change. So just a question for you in terms of what was the big challenge that you guys, across this list or any other list, what did you struggle with?
Well, it's cost, basically. So we ran quite quickly with the cloud. We got excited, but while we was doing that, we wasn't really turning anything off in our data centers. We was building out a large cloud footprint. People are not buying as many newspapers as they used to do. Mm-hmm. So as we go on our journey to the digital platforms, we have to really focus on our costs. So collaboratively with my colleagues in Asia Pac and North America, we've come together to really focus on cost control recently.
Okay, great. Want to take it away? Show us some of the, where you got started?
Yeah, so, I've been at News Corp for 2 years now, and, as you can see from the things up there, these are the things we constantly run into with our digital teams and the problems we had in our cloud footprint. There was no tagging. There was a reluctance to adopt reserved instances. People saw that as kind of a static thing, and they wanted to be able to change on a regular basis. So reserved instances wasn't that popular at the time. If we did have any reserved instances, they were underutilized. There was no right sizing in the environment. People would go build a Ferrari when they didn't need a Ferrari. People were leaving things lying around. We'd have dev teams come in, build stuff. There was elastic load balancing left unused, EBS volumes left unattached. Our S3 storage was growing exponentially. We wasn't forecasting for the growth that we was experiencing. And people just wasn't turning things off and not shutting environments down on a nighttime.
Okay, great. In terms of the enterprise, there's actually a unique challenge that I think is overlooked in the enterprise, and that's that the truth is that most management of infrastructure, cloud infrastructure specifically in the enterprise, is actually decentralized. And this isn't the way that infrastructure was managed 10 years ago. There was kind of the volume knob was dialed all the way towards central IT control. And as part of the cloud adoption actually came kind of line of business inward. So when we actually have customers that are enterprise customers, it's not uncommon to see 500-600 Amazon accounts, and those are 500-600 instances where at some point in time in that organization, there was an adoption of Amazon within some team, and that adoption kind of grew over time. And so there's an enormous amount of complexity that enterprises are dealing with, and they've allowed the distributed management to occur primarily to achieve the innovation and the agility that they seek in the cloud. But that plus the pace of change, it's almost like this combustible mix that has occurred, which is why I think governance has kind of become front and center recently, which is when you have a rapid pace of change and you have decentralized management where anyone across an organization can drive a change that could cause a cost overrun, that could cause a security exposure, that could cause some other business risk, it becomes something that needs to be controlled and managed in a thoughtful top-down way. Okay? Did you have any, before we go, did you have any challenge in terms of, in News Corp, of that whole decentralized adoption?
We did, and I think it's a common thing for big organizations. So I come from the enterprise background, and we follow the ITIL Foundation quite closely. Mm-hmm. So some of those principles and processes we adopted when we built our enterprise cloud out, but the digital teams didn't really kind of follow to those processes. So they kind of went a little bit rogue and went off doing their own thing. But it's a competitive marketplace, right? So the newspapers aren't selling. They need to get new products out quite quickly. Sure. The last thing they want to do is put controls in place. They just want to get there quickly. Yep. So we're kind of like trying to work more closely with them to bring some controls in. So yeah. Excellent.
Great. So in terms of where you start, so kind of enough about the history of how we got here. I look at this as a four-stage process. So our customers are, as I mentioned at the beginning, they're some of the largest users of cloud infrastructure. We have many customers with tens of thousands of instances running on Amazon and tens of petabytes of storage. And it's sprawled across, in many cases, many accounts, and it's decentralized across an organization. So I start with a simple four-step process, and I think if you're looking at implementing a governance strategy, one of the best practices I would give you is it really, you can implement it within a team, but if you have widespread adoption of Amazon across your organization, implementing it top down is actually not only the preferred way, but it's really the only way to really manage the business risk that you're trying to manage through a governance strategy. So I always start with step one, which is just establish the strategy, and we'll talk more in detail about that. Make sure that you get buy-in from stakeholders, a common mistake that we'll also talk about. Step two is just implement a tool strategy to support it, which is a governance strategy without supporting tools and resources actually has no chance at being successful. So ensuring that you've done the proper analysis, you brought in the right tools. Certainly, my company is one of the companies you certainly can look at in the space, which is we normalize, correlate all the data across your environment, and we bring it into a policy engine where you can actually drive front and center governance rules across the product. And then it's identify deliverables, which is any governance strategy should be pushing information out, information about how well you're complying to certain policies, and we increasingly see this concept of competitive gaming that occurs, where we have organizations are pushing information out to show how Department A is beating Department B in a particular aspect of managing the cloud. So making sure your stakeholders have the information that they need and information that they can act on in a governance strategy. And then it just goes back to tuning it. Just like everything in the cloud, it's a continuum. You start in one place, and you just have to constantly adapt and adjust based on the needs of your business and your lessons learned. So we'll dive into each. In terms of establishing a strategy, I like this little volume knob. Actually, I meant to have the right side say control, which is you can think of any strategy that you're going to implement. There's really no one right answer. You can't just dial everything for agility or dial everything for control. The truth is there's it's that balancing act again. You have to go figure out as you start to adopt a strategy. I might be willing to take a little bit more risk around cost. Maybe that doesn't apply to News Corp, but I might be willing to take a little bit more risk around cost because the risk is lower for me there, but around security, I need to dial this volume knob more towards control. So the key is, making sure that, that you actually have a thoughtful top-down strategy, making sure that you actually have buy-in across key stakeholders that you're going to drive a governance strategy, and then just making sure that you have the talent to support it. And this is, I've seen many organizations, or not many, I guess I've seen a good handful of them that have had their governance strategy fail because they didn't have the resources to support it. And this is a constant challenge in the cloud, which is as public cloud in particular grows so rapidly and changes so rapidly, the need for talent is insatiable. And that talent is essential to driving a good governance strategy. So a governance strategy without resourcing it is not likely to be successful. And I think, if you don't mind, I'd love to have you touch on some of the, between the digital teams and the enterprise teams, the competing priorities.
Well, it's a challenge to recruit people that are going to focus on governance. People want to build things, do digital transformation projects, and they just want to work on the cool cutting edge stuff, right? They don't want to start looking at how we can turn things off and start making savings. One of the things we are doing at News Corp is we're going to build a global team in Bangalore. We go live in the next month. One of the tracks out there will be a cloud track. They will run all the BAU operations for EMEA to start with. But in that team, I'm also going to start focusing on governance as well, so we can get a few people out there that can keep an eye on the glass and help us with our cost savings and governance.
Okay, outstanding. Great. Cloud Steward. So this is not to be confused, actually. If anyone familiar with an open source project called Cloud Steward, it's from Capital One. If you haven't checked it out, it's actually worth checking it out. I actually am not referencing that specifically here. We use this term in cloud health as a terminology for what we've seen evolving, which is as governance has kind of become increasingly pressing within organizations, there's a need to have that balancing act. And so that's kind of evolved a new role. And for lack of a better term, we've called it a cloud steward. And basically this is a person in an organization who's the champion for driving that centralized governance. And so we typically see a typical adoption pattern within an enterprise is you have distributed management, you have centralized governance. And that enables the agility at the endpoints of an organization, but it allows the organization to still make sure that it has some lightweight controls where you might identify that there's a deviation from a tagging strategy or there's underutilization of particular workloads. From the cloud steward may identify that, but they don't actually go drive the change. They actually go provide the information to the teams that actually go drive the change. So this is, I would say this is a best practice across our most mature enterprises, is to actually codify the role. In many ways, I view this as very similar to what happened with DevOps several years ago, which is DevOps kind of came on the scene after many years of us dealing with the impedance mismatch of having engineering and operations just unable to actually have a frictionless transfer between them. And in many ways, that same friction exists between the distributed management and the need for centralized governance, and so this is a codification of that. It's something you should at least consider, which is start to establish a role, establish a process around it, and it makes the whole process much more streamlined. So, and just out of curiosity, is this something, we've increasingly, customers have different names for this when we hear it. Is this something that you've been thinking about at News UK or News UK?
It is indeed. So I think I was only in the job about 6 months, and I arranged a workshop with Amazon Web Services ProServe team, and we went off site. Took my managers off site, and we was looking at the future, the cloud. What does it mean for the data center, the team of the future? And we came across this role then actually, and it was the team changes. You've got a large team supporting your infrastructure in your physical data center. Suddenly you're moving a lot of that into the cloud. The cloud, the team of the future is different. And one of the roles that we saw was key was that this governance role that would help control this cloud journey. Now, we were looking at going to potentially augment our vendor management team with such a role, but now we've got this Bangalore initiative. We're going to, as I mentioned, look at kind of bringing that cloud steward kind of role over there as well.
Yeah, it's great. There's one particular company that I have in mind where they actually have 25 different teams that are using Amazon. And what they do is on a weekly basis, they actually get leaders from each team and they get together and they review the health of how they're doing in terms of their governance strategy. And in some cases, they might see yellow on strategy, on security, and they might see, their configuration management or asset management is green. And it's a positive, constructive way for a cloud steward to actually drive value back to the organizations that are consuming the cloud. Okay, great. Right, in terms of a tool strategy, I mentioned at the beginning that having a governance strategy without a supporting tool strategy is not likely to be successful. As I mentioned, if you think about your policies that you might have policies around data encryption, you might have policies around data transfer, network data transfer across your environment. There could be policies around identity and access management. Each of these needs to, may have many components that need to be analyzed, and each of those components may have data that needs to come from a different data source. So being able to adopt a tool strategy that allows you to bring the data together in one place, analyze it, and then have insight and recommendations and be able to drive change is essential, and love to hear more about your tool strategy.
Yeah, well, we take some kind of off-the-shelf products. Everyone's familiar with New Relic, Rundeck, Puppet, etc. But working closely with our colleagues in Asia Pac and North America, we try to create our own tools as well. The chaps in Australia came up with AWS Go, which enforces shutdowns at a night time, snooze and start. We're kind of in a good place with that in the UK at the moment. We're writing scripts to delete unattached volumes, and as mentioned, and the reason I'm here today, one of the main tools we use is Cloud Health. Not only do I use it on a regular basis in my role of head of infrastructure, I've got all the guys in my team use it who work in the cloud role, but also the finance director for the IT department. He actually has it as a view on a daily basis as well. So, we see it as a major tool on a daily basis. Yeah.
Yep. And I think the tooling strategy will vary by company. There's a set of great in terms of like AWS config and Lambda functions and AWS config rules. There's a bunch of different tools available from Amazon and third-party vendors that can support you here. So I don't think any single tool strategy is right. You really just have to custom build it for your organization. Okay. Before we go on that, I did want to ask you, in terms of when you picked vendors, was there any particular pattern you used in terms of how you selected the right vendors?
Yeah, we want to make sure they're going on the same journey as us, and they kind of complement our strategy. They've got a cloud-first kind of policy, so that's quite key for us. And you can get a feel of when you work with suppliers and people, clients like your good selves, that they've got our interest. Obviously these companies are there to make money and be successful, but they kind of put our interests first. And they're the kind of companies that we want to work with.
That's great. I actually had a large enterprise who told me that one of the mistakes that they made over the years was they adopted vendors that they thought they could steer in certain directions that were critical to their business. And over repeated failures, they found that that's exactly what you don't want to do, which is you want to adopt vendors and products that are headed in the same direction, that may have similar visions to you, but don't try to steer them off of their path to support a large enterprise. And that happens in particular as a CTO and founder of a company. That happens all the time, which is you get large businesses that want to change your roadmap in substantial ways that maybe aren't consistent with the direction of your company. And I think it's a risk that you take. So it's important to adopt vendors that look at you as a partner and are trying to actually build in the same direction you're building. Okay. This is an example. So in terms of one of the steps I identified was just identifying deliverables by stakeholders. I know this is a bit of a eye chart, so you probably can't see it so well in the back of the room. What this is this is just an example of a typical rollout that we see across an enterprise. And so I mentioned before that once you have a governance strategy, it's not good enough to just roll out a governance strategy. You actually, in a decentralized management model, you actually have to deliver value back to the stakeholders. You have to tell them when they're not complying with that policy. You have to provide them not just information, but insight. You have to provide them recommendations. And so the more you provide them, the more you will find over time that there will be buy-in into the governance strategy, and there will be consistent execution of that governance strategy. So as you kind of go around here, you'll see on the very left, you'll see is the central IT. You'll have the CFO and financial analyst, and then different lines of business. So you line of business A, line of business B as an example. And then across the horizontal, you'll see there's different ways that they want to view this information. We use the term in Cloud Health perspectives, which is you can think of it as business groups. You might want to look at it by line of business or workload or application. There's an infinite number of ways that customers want to look at this. And then once you have that view of how an organization wants to assess their governance, their compliance to governance, there's a set of data that you want to provide them and insight and recommendations. And so being able to kind of instrument that whole pipeline and ensure that the right information is getting to the right stakeholders is a pivotal step in a governance strategy. And then at the bottom, which is, I think, at its core, if you're going to implement a governance strategy at scale. So at small scale, customers can go look at their Amazon console and make assessments of their compliance or lack of compliance. When you start to get into large-scale consumption of Amazon, when you get thousands of instances, and what did you say, the 1,400 RDS instances or something? Yeah, that's pretty substantial. Once you start to get effectively thousands of different resources that you need to manage, complexity goes beyond that that a human can actually consume. And this is where policy management comes in. And this is something that it's not exclusive to Cloud Health. It's something we do. I'm happy to show it to you if you happen to swing by our booth. But at its core, policy management is just being able to take this information that comes from different resources, be able to correlate it, normalize it, and then be able to institute rules on top of it that are rules representing your governance strategy. And so all of this is kind of key to, for customers of ours, they'll actually have key stakeholders will be told, you know what, you're underutilizing your Amazon reservations, or you're at risk of going over your budget this month, or you're spending an unexpectedly large amount of money on particular instance types that really are not part of your reference architecture. And these are all things that when you automate it and you actually have that information flowing to the right people at the right time, if you get the signal to noise ratio right, it becomes high value that your customers actually expect and need to actually go execute their jobs. Okay?
So this one, rinse and repeat. So when we embarked on our journey of cost optimization and governance on the cloud, it was called Project Ruthless. We had to get ruthless. We had to kind of save millions. We had to save a lot of money across News Corp. So we started as a project, but as we've gone on this journey, It's not a project no longer, it's BAU. We got to keep at it. We got to do this daily. We have to make sure that people have got objectives to continue to, take certain tasks like the enforced tagging, delete EBS volumes. This has to be done daily. It can't be just done as a project, then kind of start focusing on transformation projects. It has to be an everyday task for people with objectives.
Yep. Is this the next set of things you're doing, or
this is what we got going on at the moment?
Yeah, okay.
Again, working with our friends in Australia and North America, we're going to continue to work with some of this list here. Enforced tagging is something we really want to get to. If you don't play by the rules and it's not tagged properly, we'll remove it.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Now that kind of sends a lot of fear to the digital teams because they don't want such governance rules, but it's the only way it's going to work.
Sure. Yeah. We see that increasingly customers have moved from using tagging as a means of, best practice to actually driving, this is configured properly and you're complying to policy. So. Okay, so in terms of, two topics I know you've had on your radar, one would be cost and the other would be security. You want to tell us more about your cost experience?
Well, look, we spend a lot of money on reserved instances across News Corp, and we're starting to see the significant savings on our monthly bill from that. We had to be brave with that one. Like I mentioned at the beginning, people kind of was wary about reserved instances. I've done a big exercise on right-sizing our estate. Again, don't build a Ferrari if you don't need one. We had a lot of kind of big EC2 instances out there, just totally underutilized. Decommission what we don't need. Just turn things off. Be brave again. People seem to, for years just kept things hanging around. Or we'll go back to that. Or we can't turn that off because we might need it again. But build it again. We continue to use AWS Trusted Advisor. Everybody uses that one.
So what was your monthly bill for buying the reserve instance, turning off all the instances before and after?
Well, collectively across News Corp, we're talking hundreds of thousands. Significant amount of money. At News Corp, we spend a lot of money with AWS. So we had to start putting some rules and governance in place. And we're already reaping the benefits.
It's not uncommon to see when you start driving a governance strategy around cost to see a 50% reduction in your costs over time. And the irony there is the first 25, 30% actually comes quite easily, and then it becomes there's more friction as you start to identify additional challenges where you can optimize. But once you get to efficient cost governance, maintaining it from there is actually not so hard. So it's a worthwhile investment. It can seem daunting upfront to actually go embark on it, but I think in many cases 50% is a pretty reasonable target. Okay. And in terms of just common mistakes, I mean, I've seen customers accidentally spin up 25,000 instances in a day. What mistakes did you make?
That's happened. We've had that before. Not often, but it's happened. The biggest one is not adopting the governance from day one. Mm-hmm. We left it too late. We kind of embarked on a journey of agility, innovation, and it was all very exciting, but we should have kind of had better controls in earlier.
Okay, great. Security, tell us about...
Well, we take security very seriously at News Corp, and we've got some best practice. We use security groups. Our network ACLs are reviewed constantly. We have AM roles, groups created and applied to instances. Users not active in use are removed immediately. IAM users are audited and user accesses are modified. Mm-hmm. So we do take security quite seriously. And again, with some of the processes I mentioned, where the cloud team have to do that on a daily basis and put it in their PDR and objectified. Mm-hmm. Same with the security initiatives.
Yeah. How has the security team had to adapt to actually managing security in the cloud?
Yeah, they've had to adopt the new processes. They've had to think differently, but more so, rather than the security team being in charge and just kind of setting the rules and kind of putting a big wall in, they've had to work more closely with the cloud infrastructure teams. Okay. They've had to understand a bit more flexibility, but they've also had to kind of go on the journey with us as well. Yeah,
and there's a lot of great resources here. If you don't have best practices, one I would point you to is anyone familiar with Center for Internet Security is, it's a good framework that you can go look at. It's a nonprofit organization based out of New Jersey. They publish a variety of different best practice benchmarks. One they publish is for Amazon. And being able to implement those best practices is a good starting point if you're looking for governance around security. Okay? All right, so key success metrics. So there's a variety of different ways that you can look at success metrics across governance, and there's really no one-size-fits-all to everything. One component that you want to look at in terms of just topics, I typically talk about these 5 topics. One is architectural. This is one that often gets overlooked, which is at the end of the day, to really drive high efficiency, you're looking for reference architectures. You're looking for having standards by which you actually provision infrastructure and manage that infrastructure. And so you want to measure your compliance to those standards. Now, typically when a company gets in the cloud, it's kind of a free-for-all. There isn't standardization. Standardization evolves over time as a governance strategy matures. But this is just one to watch for, which is over time you should have different workloads that have different usage patterns, and they get provisioned in very predefined ways, and they're configured in certain ways, and not just from inside the operating system using a configuration management tool like Ansible or Chef, but also how they're configured from a management plane, from an Amazon Fabric perspective. So that's just one to look for, and there's a variety of different key metrics that we have customers report. One of our customers just reports on just compliance to the standards, where there's actually kind of like a documented standard across all of the workloads and your percentage compliance to those standards. A second is obviously cost. We see a lot of metrics around TCO and ROI and just your efficiency of leveraging that infrastructure. So making sure that you shut infrastructure, the classic term is turn the lights out at night. So a lot of cloud workloads we find across customers, and I'm sure you saw this as well, a lot of cloud workloads aren't harnessing the consumption-based nature of the cloud. And so there are cases where workloads can be auto-scaled up, auto-scaled down, where you can turn the lights out at night because they're not using them. But it's so easy just to not do that. And so over time, driving metrics around how efficiently teams are using the cloud is essential. And one of the things I mentioned before, I'll just bring up here, is we increasingly see customers looking to make it a game. So it's a competitive game across teams that are using the cloud, which is they try to push out information that raises their cost IQ, and then they let them compete against each other to see who's more efficient and who's actually better utilizing their infrastructure. Third component is just asset management, which is when you provision infrastructure, you want it configured in a certain way. If it's if it's perimeter web servers for a particular application, and you want them configured in a certain way with certain egress, ingress, backing VPCs and security groups, just making sure that you have that defined and configured consistently, and that any deviations from that configuration are something that you know about and can actually understand why that change has occurred, and potentially undo that change, roll that change back if in fact it's not compliant with your policy is something else that you want to look for. And security, I think you can use benchmarks if you're in a regulated industry, being able to comply with different regulations is one challenge. But even internally, just being able to comply with your own internal standards around encryption and data at rest, and network security and application security, and data continuity. So, and then the last one is just adoption. And this is another area that gets overlooked, which is as you're driving a transformation, this is particularly important across an enterprise where you're actually driving a transformation strategy, being able to assess how well you're executing that strategy and the adoption of different teams. And I have one particular company that measures this based on the breadth of services that are adopted, the adoption of new services that come from Amazon that can actually enable value in the business. So this is another area where you can look at having metrics. I think being able to, once you have the governance strategy, once you're kind of raising the IQ across all of your stakeholders, being able to put some KPIs in place for it and be able to measure that over time is just a key component to make sure that you're constantly tuning and getting better and more efficient and more effective. Okay? And I'm happy to take a question. Is there any questions so far anybody has? Okay, all right, great. All right, so in terms of what's next for governance, governance has a long way to go, which is, I think this is, there really were not many sessions at reInvent last year around governance. It's something that we've seen evolve as a front and center topic that companies are struggling with in the cloud. So there's kind of 4 areas that I'd love to chat about in terms of just we see evolving in governance. One is just processes, and this kind of goes back to my analogy of DevOps, where there was an impedance mismatch and there was not just a culture of DevOps that was created, but there was a set of kind of best practice processes that got adopted over time. That same transformation of processes and adoption of processes has to occur around governance, and just be able to codify best practices in more efficient ways that we can actually manage our infrastructure, control our infrastructure without giving up the agility that brought us into the cloud. Another is just roles. So I'd mentioned the cloud steward. I think that's just one example of a central role that you can adopt that, and it could be a part-time role, it could be a full-time role that ensures more effective usage of infrastructure and more secure usage of infrastructure. But I think there's additional roles that will evolve, I think, we've seen some people adopt, a VP of cloud, where there's actually a single point where all of the authority over consumption and governance actually rolls up. So I think there's a handful of roles that will evolve over time. Third is tooling. I think the tooling today is surprisingly immature, and I don't mean from a cloud vendor perspective, I just mean across the whole spectrum, which is, given the fact that most of us are dealing with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of changes that are occurring across our infrastructure per week, being able to have tools that can give you real-time or near real-time understanding of, are you in compliance? Did you just expose yourself to a security risk? Are you likely to have this particular team go over budget as a result of the change that they just made? Have that just continuous evaluation, and then pushing the right information out to the right people that includes not just that there's something to pay attention to, but what you might be able to do about it. So this is something that my company, it's an area I'm particularly passionate about. It's something that we've been investing in, but it's something that you should think about as well, which is, over time, as you scale up your usage, you're going to have dozens of different tools that you're using. You might have Chef, Puppet, Ansible, SaltStack, New Relic, App Dynamics, Alert Logic, and the list goes on. And being able to do that with public cloud infrastructure, potentially hybrid cloud infrastructure, and be able to bring all that data in a way, in a place where you can actually understand your compliance on a near real-time basis, is going to be increasingly essential as time goes on. And then just the last piece is shared standards, which is, today what we see across our customer base is everyone's creating their own standards. They're actually implementing their own policies in cloud health, and they all, if it's not a cloud health provided default policy, they all look a little bit different, and to some extent that's expected, but to some extent it's becoming increasingly important for customers to start to have more standard practices and just ways where they can actually share their best practices with other peers in their industry, so that we all don't start from the same starting point of constructing our own governance strategy. And I'm just curious, like, where do you see governance going for News Corp?
Well, I think we need to continue the good work we've done over the last 12 months, because when I joined, there was pretty much enterprise over here, digital over here, and never the twain shall meet. We've done some good work to bring those together, working together, collaborating more. We collaborate very closely with our friends in Australia and North America, continue with that, continue to adopt shared services and tools. Don't let people go rogue. Don't let people go off and do things their own way. But also that objective, we're all in it together. Governance and cost control, we should all share the same kind of objective.
Yeah, makes sense. Have you managed to get to the point where you're actually looking at putting like KPIs and dashboards and assessing the quality of your adherence to it?
Yeah, well, we certainly are doing that in the enterprise world. I can't necessarily speak for the digital teams at the moment, but I do know that from a senior leadership team, they're trying to drive the same set of standards and KPIs. Okay, awesome. All right, great. So just one last piece, and then I'm happy to take any questions you have. So these are just 5 best practices that I pass on to you, and I've seen many organizations make mistakes in this area. I'll confess I've made a couple of these myself. First I'd give you is just empower a central owner, which is one of the things is when everybody owns something, no one owns something. And so being able to have one person that you can say, you know what, I'm looking for you to actually drive our cost efficiency. I'm looking for you to drive the security of our adoption of the cloud.
just identifying that owner, empowering that owner, and just making sure that that owner knows that this is a role that requires high collaboration with the teams that are consuming the cloud. It's not a dictatorship. It's a collaboration role where you actually are adding value back to key stakeholders. So that's one. Second is don't give up on agility. I've seen some organizations try to turn the knob too quickly and say, you know what, we had this enormous cost overrun last month, or we had a security exposure, and it's caused by this distributed management, and we just want to dial the volume knob all the way back towards control. That makes no sense, that's not how infrastructure is being built today. It's not how we're going to build infrastructure for the next 10 years, which is the world of bureaucratic, slow-moving infrastructure. That's yesterday's infrastructure, which is you need to always be aspiring to be as agile as possible. So one of the mantras I used to have years ago is I used to tell my engineering teams that our goal is to use as close to 100% of the resources that we've provisioned while maintaining security, availability, and performance. And I think that's a good goal around agility, which is always strive to be more agile and don't let governance get in your way. Governance does not have to be bureaucratic. It can be lightweight. It can be value add. It can be a very positive, constructive thing across an organization and make you more efficient. Third is create partnerships with strategic vendors. You can't do this with everyone. Your time's limited. I sympathize with many of you that are actually driving governance strategies or managing the cloud, which is, I'm sure you have lots of vendors that want to talk to you. And choosing the ones that you really want to spend time to is, you want to do wisely. And you want to choose the vendors that add the most value to your business and reduce the risk of your business and its adoption of the cloud. So, just finding a handful of those, investing in those, spending time. One of the things that I know our customers do, and certainly News Corp does, is just getting together on a regular basis, attending. We had a customer appreciation breakfast this morning in terms of just diving into specific issues that you're having and making sure that you have a vendor that's actually steering its strategy to support you. Third, I would say, is just establish high-value policies. This is the rinse and repeat that Ian talked to, which is start with the highest value. If your pain point is cost, if you have a CFO who's just saying, I don't get this, which is we went to the cloud because we thought it was going to be less expensive than data center infrastructure, but I'm paying for power and cooling and everything else in my data center, and I see my costs going up. I think that's an example of, establish high-value policies where you can actually show the value back to your stakeholders, back to your organization around how governance and tighter management can actually have an impact on your business. And then over time, you can start to expand them. So I think understanding which ones to start, we tend to find they tend to start around cost and security, exactly like your examples. And then the last piece is automate, which is at the end of the day, you manage thousands of cores of compute. You are not going to do this with human beings. And if you are not managing thousands of cores of compute, you're managing maybe hundreds. If you will someday be managing thousands, you need to have a plan to get the humans out of this process. And so governance over time, if we fast forward 3 or 4 or 5 years into the future, our relationship with, we're at this tipping point right now with how we manage cloud infrastructure. The example I always provide people is to some extent we're using the cloud over the last several years as better virtualization, but things like the platform services from Amazon and some of the announcements we saw today, or things like Lambda, just show you that how we're going to engage with cloud infrastructure in the future is going to be fundamentally different. And so being able to drive a headless, software-driven automation of your business policies and your governance policies will over time be essential. You don't have to start there, though. You can start with people driving this for you. You can iterate through a few feedback loops, start to learn and tune, and then over time you can look at how is it that I make it so I take the humans out of this and just drive the changes. So this is something that I particularly believe in, and it's something that I've invested heavily in my product to go do, which is, things as simple as, there's an opportunity to save $1,000 today by actually splitting these reserved instances and merging these coterminous reserved instances and just driving that change. Rather than have a human being go identify that change for you, you can actually have software that sits there continuously, identifies that there's an opportunity, and then drives that change for you. Okay? And that's it. So we have a few minutes. If there's any questions, we're happy to answer them. For Ian or myself, yeah, please.